So so we are here because our starting point is to do what? We have a professional designation, but I think the world has changed quite dramatically. And even with this professional qualification, they expose us to different, say, competencies. They are strong in one area and maybe not so strong in the other. And that's how generally the benefits lies, or the synergies lie, when you are able to use these pathway agreements that are available to jump from one to the other. And just like for example, our CA qualifications for the longest time, it has been a little bit light on, say, people and leadership skills. And it has improved to some extent when it comes to strategy. But then you then have other qualification like, say, CIMA, that is very strong in that, because they even have a pillar, which is the enterprise pillar, that develops aspects that we don't necessarily find in the SICA or CA professional exams. So that's why I'm saying that there is where they find each other, and therefore one will traditionally pursue the different qualifications in order to be able to get exposure to these kind of skills. And one of the things about this professional designation as well that is very important is to understand that in some cases they are really a stepping stone, in terms of when one wants to really pursue a particular field, particular role, then more work will obviously be required. But what they do is that they just help, in most instances, open the door, get you that interview. And in the South African context, we have seen many employers that will then say, yeah, for this role, we want a CA. And you might be saying that, but I've got the right expertise, I've got the right experience. So what is a CA? Why is there such a demand for it? What is it all about? And therefore, one could then be able to see the value in the qualification. So that's why for us, it's very important to then just unpack what makes a CA. And therefore, maybe also from your own professional qualification or experience, you can be able to start seeing how then securing a designation like this will be able to leverage your professional experience to open some of the doors that are currently not available. So this is something that we're just going to unpack here. Then for us to start though, because as I was saying, the course has been designed for professionals. So these are professionals that are coming from another designation. It's not for graduates, it's not for CTA, ITC candidates, but it's designed for professionals, recognizing that our starting point is different from, saying, a CTA student. Our starting point is different from an ITC student, from a finance graduate. But our starting point is really framed by the qualifications competency framework. So both ACCA as well as CIMA have put out quite a lot of guidance in terms of what their profession is all about, and the set of technical competencies as well as other competencies that professionals holding this designation are to have. So with the CIMA one, this is a classic outline of the syllabus, which then just clarifies how one progresses through the syllabus before they are considered to be an associate of the professional designation. But more importantly for us, is to do what? Is to understand how or what skills are CIMA members expected to have or to possess. And here, I love this donut kind of diagram, because it captures those in a very beautiful manner. To say that when you are engaging with a CGMA, ACMA, you are talking to someone who's got technical skills. Because, for instance, to handle the case that you are expected to evaluate decisions, to manage different stakeholders, to raise financing and so on, and that requires technical skills. Excuse me. Because when you look at some of these things and some of these big transactions that I entered into, you'll hear the likes of Eskom has entered into a debt agreement. The debt agreement is linked to best interest at JIBA plus 2%. In addition, they've taken a swap agreement in order to do this and that. So when we talk about technical, we are talking about those kind of things, because those things are relevant in the process of value creation. You need to be able to understand the technical in order to be able to make decision on some of these things. Then the second one, the decision that you make, though, as much as they might have technical elements, they will consider business context. They will consider business context. And for instance, and it's always quite interesting when you are reading, for instance, about some of the things that the government is looking to do. And just one of them being the separation of Eskom into the different entities. And you then hear some of the conversation and the consent from different key stakeholders. That one will be the biggest concerns from debt holders. And the debt holders will then have their own consent to say, wait, when you are separating this, where is our debt going to sit? Because technically speaking, our debt has to be serviced by cash. So we need to understand where cash is sitting and whether our debt, the debt burden of where it's now sitting still makes sense and gives us the comfort. So therefore, when one is making a decision, they have to consider the technical about leveraging, the context of cash flows and the servicing of that particular debt. But at the same time, business will then want you to recognize, therefore, how will this space look like after this transition has happened? How will then this cash that needs to service this debt be generated? What are the issues? What are therefore the key stakeholders that one needs to be mindful of? So business skills and business acumen becomes critical. Then people skills. Then people and leadership will always be what? Will always be crucial. Because in this world, you are bound to be engaging with what? With people. And understanding that for a finance role, you might be that you are either going to be reporting to a CFO who's got some particular needs, or you are either going to have a team in finance, or you are either going to be dealing and engaging with stakeholders that will require to be supported by your team. So understanding how to engage with people, drive people performance, and how to handle conflicts and to negotiate to get what you need will be is something that is crucial and very much well embedded in the CGMA designation. And lastly, it is what? It is the digital acumen, recognizing the significance of what? Of system and their role in decision making and also implementing strategic decisions. So this is what we've come to understand about what we've come to understand about the CIMA designation. And therefore, when we build, we are understanding that we are building from here. We are therefore developing technical or further developing technical competencies from here. And one of the things that is easily apparent when you get closer to the CIMA syllabus, it is the light coverage of text, and also very limited coverage of external audit and assurance. So we understand that when it comes to those aspects, that's where we need to therefore do what? We therefore need to make sure we are mindful of the professional context. Then we also have the ACCA members, and the ACCA qualification. It is a very interesting one as well. And the way that they look at it, they look at it also from a progression perspective, but progression more of knowledge moving towards to competencies, whereas CIMA has got both skills, knowledge, but it also has a very interesting role focus that they always clarify when they're unpacking the syllabus. And all of these things are embedded in this qualification. Is just the way that they're thought of is quite different. So from a ACCA perspective, the initial aspect, just then do what? The initial aspects, we start off with the foundation, where now it's like CIMA certificate in business accounting. And because generally in the South African context, and in most African context, we find that most people either do what senior certificate, and therefore that is not much of an issue, or they do rather an undergraduate degree and in a financial space. So the foundation and the applied knowledge are generally things that most people don't get to right. But the applied skills, that's where then most people then start getting or considering different exemptions. But in terms of coverage, there is tax, there is performance management, which is what we discuss under our math section of the course. There is audit and assurance, which is part of what? Which is part of the external audit world. Corporate law, very important to build the foundations for governance that we're going to discuss. Financial reporting, quite key and majority of our content. Then financial management, key for value creation thinking. And then there's what? Then there's the ethics component. So the ACCA, in terms of coverage, it's got quite a lot of the technical that we'll expect, that we see in the CA journey. But it's just a matter of focus and a difference of maybe the rigor that they go into it. And when I say that, is because here in the CA qualification, they've got fewer exams, but they've got very much more integrated thinking. Because if you compare, say, the CIMA, ACCA, and say the CA qualification, the CA qualification only has 2 professional exams after the academic journey. But when you look at other qualification, there are more exams that one has to go through. And that then enhances the need for SAICA, ICAS to do what? To then have a heightened integration of these elements, which then is something that CA candidates are much exposed to much earlier in their journey. Because as it stands, ITC, it's say a 400 mark assessment, candidates go in where now it's not clear how each and every paper will be structured, except that it will be out of 400 and the 4 primary disciplines will be tested. So coming to understand those things, you then get to see the difference between what? The different qualification and why then the approach that we take might be a little bit different to how you might have come to see things. Then on the last one, the ACCA now takes a very interesting turn after going through ethics, because they then cover what? They then cover more of senior role papers, which are also case study driven. And the idea there is that there are 2 essential papers as well as others that need to be what? That need to be completed for one or before one qualifies. And with the recent accreditation by ARBA, then candidates coming from them have got advanced audit and assurance, and therefore a lot of the AUD aspect they'll then be able to what? To familiarize themselves with. It will now be bringing it together in terms of the different kind of focus that we have from a CA space. So this is our frame of thinking, our starting point in terms of why and how we got to design the program like this. And you'll get to also better understand why this here and that here when we unpack it even more. Okay, then now let's go into that. So from a CASA and a CAZIM perspective, what is it that we are expecting, or what is it that the qualification it's well recognized for? So when they came out and they said that, yeah, we are back at number 1, they had a very interesting breakdown in terms of what was assessed. What was assessed was 1, competence, the ability to do what we do. And it was noted that CAs are excellent when it comes to what? To technical competence or to just executing. Then it was also about delivering on their promise. It was also about making an impact. So those were some of the things that were captured when that survey came out. So now those things has now really changed the perception from or for what? For potential employers, because they look at it and say that, yes, we also want a CA because of the things that we are hearing about them. So this has now become a sought after premier business designation. And it is all this kind of thinking that that contributed to it. And we have seen that this accolade is not just limited to the South African context, but it's a global it's a global award, meaning that CAs, wherever they go, they are being recognized as being the top in the entire world. So that's where the global recognition comes in. And we have seen so many articles, whether they're talking about professional accountants in the CA space or otherwise, that there is quite a lot of demand, especially in the UK market, for SA accountants. And then in terms of just how the world today, keeps on evolving, I mean, right now we have been told about the newly issued IFRS 18, changing how we do some of the primary reporting. Last year, we were just introduced to We were just introduced to IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. So the world keeps on changing. One therefore needs to have the ability to adapt, whether they are working for a profit organization, listed space, small organization, public, private. One of the things that we are seeing being recognized today about a CA is the versatility in the skills, and therefore enhancing the demand. Then lastly, it is also part of the survey to say CAs are known to make a difference. And that's where we come in to being responsible leaders in business. To being responsible leaders in business. And being a responsible leader in business, it's more than just knowing our work, but it's also about exercising good judgment. It's about also being ethical. It's also being mindful that we need to always act with integrity and protect the interest of those that don't have, say, the capacity or the resources to do so. So they play a significant role in what? In developing society. Then how does one then get there so that we can understand some of the elements that define this? And for me, what is important is that once you integrate with other candidates that might have done the traditional route, you then understand their journey. You are also able to understand where your journey will then enhance your, say, employability, your value add to a particular organization. So the CA qualification requires that one, firstly, completes an undergraduate degree. And this degree, in order to really make it meet the objective of SAICA much earlier, SAICA goes and accredits the what? The degrees. So in various universities, the degrees in South Africa are accredited by SAICA. Then afterwards, then we go to what? We go to a program called PGDA, Postgrad Diploma in Accounting, or otherwise CTA. The CTA is another accredited program. And those are two separate accreditations that an entity needs to have. They need to have an accreditation for one, the undergraduate as well as for CTA. And at that point, as I'm saying, there are no professional exam, and it's important that therefore when one wants to pursue this particular journey, they go through those traditional routes of, I'm in an accredited institution or with a program that is accredited, and I go do a postgraduate that is also accredited. And in the postgraduate program, the candidates are exposed to 4 modules: accounting, audit, math, as well as tax, 4 of them. And they are taught how to start thinking about them in an integrated manner. They are done so because they are required to write, for instance, 5-hour plus exams, where in the morning they will come and write, say, accounting. Later, they will write audit. Then 15 minutes later, they'll write tax, and later they will write what? They will write math without a break in between, other than the 15 minutes to facilitate the submission process. So that is something that we get to see about this qualification, that the rigor starts there. Then later on, within the same CTA, the candidates sometimes find themselves sitting with a 100-marker paper that might have 50 marks audit, 20 marks accounting, 30 marks taxation, where now they have to look at the same scenario and deal with the same issues but from different technical perspective. So that is another thing about what? About the qualification. Afterwards, they write, even when you look at UNISA, very comprehensive exam. So from a UNISA perspective, they write about 1,000 marks before they are given the CTA in a space of 5 days. Day 1, 100 marks in the morning, then 100 marks in the afternoon. Day 2, 100 marks, day 3, 100 marks. And that means in a space of 5 days, someone will have written assessments out of 1,000 marks. So that rigor is what then gives the market the impression that, yes, the candidates have really gone an extra mile to get to where they are. Then there is what? Then there is the ITC, which then says now it's 400 marks, but it's testing everything that has been covered in CTA in just a space of what? 2 days. Then afterwards, the candidates, like, they're given an academic break. They start their training. And after their training, after they've ticked just 20 months of training, they can sit for the APC assessment. And now, that technical that they were required to bring for CTA or developing CTA and demonstrating ITC, they are required to have it as a foundation. So that means by the time they get to CTA, to APC, they have what? They now have experience plus the technical. And now APC just now gels the two together. And it now evolves it into kind of a setup that is more likely to be seen in a workspace. And after that, when one passes the APC and completes the training, they can qualify as a CA or otherwise CAZ. And after that, it becomes part of CPD. So that is how the journey looks like. So our journey now, as we can see, we are starting after we've been ticked off from CTA and after we've been ticked off from ITC. And we are going to APC that then requires, or that then merges the two together. So that is where this program then comes in, to say that sometimes that could be a little bit heavy to comprehend, a little bit heavy to then deal with. But, and yes, we don't have the time to do a 2-year program where we go back and do CTA, because even if you were to do CTA, one will then say you need to do CTA 1. How old is your qualification? You need to do 3rd year, then come do CTA, and then be exposed to that rigor. Then afterwards, then come and do ITC, which will require a minimum of what? Of 3 years to get right. But with this particular program, we have come to understand, and we are going to use our expertise to say that, but yes, it's true that ATC brings the two together. But there are things that the APC necessarily brings. It's not everything that one has done in CTA, but there are those that it necessarily demands. So what we are now interested in doing is to extract only those that are relevant and make sure that you have them at the same level as a CTA ITC candidate. That's what we want to do. So it's not going to be a replica of CTA. We are not going to then create an illusion that, no, we're going to have CTA in just a space of 6 months. But we're going to deal with the core aspects of it and recognizing that you will have done some of the work before because you are here as finance professionals. So bringing the two together, we will then pick very delicately key topics that we know that if you master them, you will find APC to be a walk in the park from a technical perspective. Okay, so that is important to understand from this particular journey. Then, how does then the structure for CA looks like? So we have looked at CIMA, we have looked at the ACCA. Now let's look at the cycle one. So the cycle one looks like this. They call this the CA 2025 framework. And they talk about creating that one CA that is just exceptional, a difference maker, and a responsible business leader. So when you look at this, you can see some overlap with what we've already spoken about in the other qualifications. So firstly, they then define a CA or a responsible leader as someone who behaves ethically and who creates sustainable value for a wide range of stakeholders by actively participating in an organization's value creation process. Now, how does that look like? Then they say that responsible leaders implies that a CA should always display professional values and attitudes, okay, and have the full range of technical competencies of a professional accountant. I see technical, and those enabling competencies to demonstrate responsible leadership qualities in a specific domain. So to then Psyche and ICAS, a responsible business leader is someone that can integrate these three bubbles. So they've got professional values and attitude that they're able to demonstrate. They've got these enabling competencies. They've got these enabling competencies. Then they also have these technical competencies. Now, but which ones? And therefore, how are we going to make sure that by the time we are done, you are there? So the other part, which seems to be a big misconception, it's what? A CA's professional competence therefore extends beyond specific accounting technical expertise. So it's not the bubble of technical that makes CAs to be what they are. But as I'm saying that even when you look at the survey, they say that one, yes, they are good at what they do. But two, they are what? They are trustworthy. Three, they're dependable. They do what they do what? They do what they promised. And three, they make an impact. So this is what this wants to just ensure that consistently happens. Okay. Then let's just understand the elements of these bubbles. Let's start with technical competencies. So the technical competencies that they're talking about, when you read their guidelines, they tell us that these have been developed in ITs, in the academic program, CTA, and in the ITC as well. So that is the technical competence they're talking about. So it is therefore important to understand that as well, that when we get you to the APC, there's no new technical that we'll be teaching you. And that's why sometimes there's that disconnect, because the technical learning is done in ITC and CTA, and that's it. The APC does not attempt to develop technical. It attempts to apply it in a professional context. And thus, the CCC. So now we have this technical competence, but in what? So they then clarify that in accounting and external reporting, which is our ACC, in financial management, which is our MEF, in tax, which is just that, in audit and assurance, which is AUD, in management decision-making and control, which is MEF again, and lastly, in strategy, risk, and governance, which is what? Which is a SRMG. And we split it into both audit and MEF. So this is what has already been covered. So this is what we're going to be covering in our CCC. But what are these other professional values and attitude that we need to embrace? So these are ethical leadership, lifelong learning, as well as what? Citizenship. So these are the three. So how will we then demonstrate that? So you've been here and looking to further develop your technical. That is part of the long life learning aspect that we're going to apply. But we're going to do it in a very light way. We are not going to expose you to some of the new standards that might not be applicable by the end of this year, or that will otherwise be further developed in the APC as part of lifelong in there. Like for instance, we are not going to do what? We are not going to be talking about IFRS 18, the new one. We are not going to do IFRS S1, IFRS S2, for instance. We are just going to focus on lifelong learning as it pertains to what? To the technical elements. Ethical leadership will be embedded in our auditing lectures, where now we just clarify ethics from personal ethics, business ethics, as well as ethics governed by the Code of Professional Ethics, King 4, and a little bit of what? Of that can be expected from law. So these are some of the things that we'll be mindful of. Then we talk about enabling competencies. These are the terminology that you'll be hearing quite a lot from our lecturers. You will need to be superstars when it comes to critical thinking, superstars when it comes to business acumen, and also what? Effective communication. Digital acumen, planning and organizing, emotional skills, leadership, they are somewhat embedded in some of the technical, but we'll further explore those in the APC program. For here, it will be mostly related to the technical. So that is where we are going. But before we then what? Let me just see how far we. Yeah, okay, let me just finish, then we'll take a break. So before we get there, obviously, we will need to understand how there looks like. What is this final assessment that you'll be sitting for? And you might be asking, how is it different from the case study that I've already written in my professional journey? And how do these things that you're talking about, how does SAICA and ICAS assess it from us? How do then the candidates that have then studied ITC 20 months before they sit for APC expected or able to then bring that knowledge? Are they always ready for everything? So those are some of the things that I'll want to just what? Clarify. So 1, the APC. This is a multidisciplinary what? As case study. It's a multidisciplinary case study requiring you to bring real life context as well as a very strong technical knowledge. How so though? So the way that it works is that 1, you get what in your professional qualification space you call a pre-scene. So you get a pre-scene 5 days before the exam. That's the first fundamental difference. 5 days before the exams. That's number 1. But unlike the pre-scene I've seen for say CIMA, which is about 30 pages, the CA1 is about 15 pages. Interesting. Then when you get to the day, you are then given what they call an information on the day. So this needs to be understood from the context of the PRI. So what does the PRI work? So the PRI will then say, this is a company involved in, let's say it's a bookstore. Okay, it's a bookstore. It's operating in this country. And unlike the global qualification, because the global qualifications always try to have a neutral kind of country. In our case, you'll find that it will either be happening in Zim if it's part of CAZ, or it will be happening in South Africa if it's part of CASA. So that's where the context happens. That's number 1. Then they will paint the context in a way that will look familiar to you, where they'll then say that, yeah, we know that South Africa has been struggling, they're going to elections, blah, blah, blah. So the things that they talk about there, you can relate with them because it's quite common. Then it has a number of emails, which in them they have what we call triggers, technical triggers. So that's how they bring the technical from CT and ITC into the APC. So how so, for instance, they could then say that with the boom or the advancement or the penetration of smartphones as well as tablets and internet, the entities bookstores are under pressure, and we are now sitting with a problem of where we might need to close some of these. I will need your assistance with helping me to put together an update to the board on the financial reporting implication of this decision. Then if they stop there, that's a trigger. And the question is, what is it triggering? And that's where your technical comes in. You will then be able to say, what is the issue here? Okay, the issue is that this closure happening. Why are the closure happening? They're happening because the bookstore industry is under pressure. Okay. So what does that mean? Therefore, it means that we need to do 1, 2, and 3. So that is what is expected. You then take a trigger, you use your technical in order to solve it. Another trigger could be, we have now decided to sell one of the bookstore, and we found a buyer. If you can please start thinking, I would like for you to get involved. If you can start thinking about some of the relevant issues that could arise relating to this proposed transaction, then you might say that, sure, what is the trigger there? The trigger, it could be triggering that if you are to assist, you could assist with how to account for the disposal of that business. Tick. Or how to value that business before a decision is finalized. Tick. Or it could be about what are the financial reporting implications. Sorry, the strategic considerations that one will need to be mindful of before they finalize the decision to sell the store. So do you see now that you are getting all this in the pre-scene or pre-release, and you need to work through it ahead of Wednesday? So there will be about 7 to say 9 triggers that you need to manage. So that's where the other rigor comes in, and you therefore need strong technical, because for 2 issues I've mentioned, you might say that, Rendan, I need to therefore study what is an impact on a store closure because the industry is not doing well. What is the impact of the store closure itself? But store closure comes with employee retrenchments. How do I account for employee retrenchments? Then the other one, they decided to sell. It could be that we need to know what were the account implications when we acquired and therefore dispose of them. So there are a number of triggers that will be coming, and they will generally all require some technical presence. Some technical presence. Then yeah, maybe let's take a quick break here so that we can just come back and unpack it a little bit more in detail. So let's take, so it's 9:55. Let's come back at 10:10. Then we'll deal with it properly, because I don't want to rush it. It's such an important part of our journey. 10:10, please. Thank you.